Hi everyone and welcome to our live stream about God of War, the board game. My name is Elena. I am joined here today by two of the game designers, Leo Almeida and Fabio Curi. How are both of you? Let's start. If you guys can present yourselves to the audience, I think maybe some people are joining us for the first time. So let's start with Leo, shall we?
Hey everyone, I'm Leo. I am one of the game designers for God of War the board game. I work at other Simon titles as well as Masters of the Universe, Stranger Things, Starcadia Quest, a bunch of other games among them.
What about you, Curi? Hello there.
Hey guys, I'm Fabio Curi. I'm also one of the game designers for God of War the board game. I've worked on many other Simon projects, such as a couple of Zombicides, Marvel Zombies, a Zombicide game, a Song of Ice and Fire tabletop miniatures game, and a Song of Ice and Fire Tactics.
Okay, and now we are here today to talk to you all about God of War, the board game. How long have you guys been working on this?
Well, Fabio has started working before me, so I guess he can start.
Okay, this game has been a couple of years in the making. We've taken a very long time to dedicate and put our love into this game because we are all huge God of War fans, and we really want this to show in the game design and how we were able to adapt, right, a board game out of this amazing material and this intellectual property.
Yeah,
But
we've been working for quite a while now. As I've said, as I entered the project as a game designer more towards the half of it. So the start was really Fabio and Alex working, getting the essence of God of War and applying to what the game should be. And as I entered after with Patrick, we also were trying to grasp what they envisioned for the game and channeled into the gameplay to be more smooth and even better. Yeah.
so before we dive into the game and everything else, I think it's time for our exclusive first look at the trailer, which, if I'm not mistaken, is a first look for you guys as well.
Yeah, I'm very
So
excited.
let's go. Okay, if you weren't excited before, I'm sure you are now.
It's even better. Damn, that trailer's so good. The music and all.
Yeah.
Okay, so God of War, the board game. Can you introduce us to it? I think maybe an overview of where we're at in the story first and everything else.
Sure thing. God of War the board game. It's an we imagine the events that would be possible between both games, and we play scenarios that you could play with Kratos and Atreus that could have happened between them. So they fight monsters in them. They try to figure out puzzles. God of War, the board game, is a two-player game, cooperative game, and it focused a lot on the synergy between father and son of Kratos and Atreus. So a lot of the mechanics are based on that.
Yes,
Anything to add, Kuri? Sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
In addition to that, I'd like to say that we really want to focus on the bond that they develop, that is implied in between games, and we exactly by showing what could have been or what could have happened at these moments. And I think that it's very interesting that while we aim to do that and create this bond between the characters, we notice that players build a bond as they play as well. So I think that's very interesting that you end a game and you're closer to the person that played with you than when you started.
Yeah, speaking of that, you said that cooperation is really important, and I think that leads us into the main mechanics of the game. So, how does that look in terms of gameplay?
Okay, so during there's a player phase and then an enemy phase, and during the player phase, the heroes, they can spend cards to perform actions, and they can use these actions not only to move and attack and so forth, but also to help each other. And as they cooperate and defeat enemies together, they'll raise their synergy and improve through their synergy track. You can see way in the back there. And as they do that, they'll get more powerful and closer to achieving their goals. Um, each scenario presents a different puzzle, and you have different bosses that you can change in different from one scenario to another. So that brings you a lot of replayability because these bosses are also, in a way, a puzzle in themselves.
Precisely. Every single aspect of the game is made towards you having many possibilities of playing the game. So you could play one scenario one time with Kratos and Atreus, play again with Kratos and Atreus, and it'd be completely different based on your decisions and how you built your characters. So, and the monsters also. Monsters and the boss, they are they're modular, so you could play with a whole different crew of monsters and boss for each scenario, and that would cause the gameplay to be very different from each game.
I see a question here. We'll take questions as we go. No dice combat system, but we do see a couple of dice here. So, what's going on?
Okay, so as Curry mentioned, at the game is divided by phases. So in the first phase, which is the heroes phase, players draw cards. It starts with three. They get stronger along the game, and these cards, they have powers in it. So they could be blue, yellow, or red. That would dictate how you're going to be able to use them as an action, and they deal damage. So as you place your card in an attack card, you will deal that amount of damage. So that's how that's how the combat works. And afterwards, the enemy phase is when the enemies activate. They would have their own behaviors. We'll get into that more specific later, and then you take damage. The dice that we have there, those are the reward dice. So whenever you defeat an enemy, a monster, you'll have to roll both dice. It depends actually. So you roll the reward die if you kill the monster, but if you're able to do it bonding with the other player, if there's damage from both players, you roll both dice. You get more rewards if you're working together with your partner, with your son or father.
Okay, I see various questions, but first, let's talk about the. Actually, let's take one first before we move forward. So, is this a 1-2 player game only?
Yes, for sure. This box brings a two-player game experience, but you can play one player as well, right? There is a solo mode included.
Yes,
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
In the solo mode, you still play with Kratos and Atreus. The experience is slightly different. You still control both miniatures, but you'll have a more solo player experience than just simulating with both characters. There's another dashboard just for that.
And you control this iconic duo, which maybe you can talk a little bit about. That dashboard does have a lot of information in it. Can you run us through it?
Definitely. So here we have the dashboard for Atreus in the front. In the core box, we'll have Kratos and Atreus. Uh, in each dashboard, we have the following elements. So you have their health, which is the heart there, how many cards they draw at the start of each turn. That's how many actions they're going to take. Notice that you can upgrade those. That's why you have those little squares that you can place cubes in it. You'll be able to upgrade them to draw more cards, to perform more actions. At the top, you have the help actions, which both players have, which is really important to talk with the other player in order to use them properly. So let's say Kratos is more tankier and he's suffering a lot of damage from the enemies. Atreus, if Kratos is in a danger position, he needs to heal Kratos. So he always needs to be aware of what's happening in with the other player in order to use the help actions properly. Alongside that, we have the summon ability, which throughout the game with the rewards that you get in it, you'll be able to scale in them. And once you get to the final position, you'll be able to use that power, summon in case for Atreus, and use one of the summons that he has. So Squirrel, Wolf, or Crow. And each has different abilities. As you can see, Squirrel is more support, so he heals between both of them. Wolf deals more damage, and Crow is more crowd control if there's a big mob. And also, we have skill trees, but that will be later more explained. That's just the space that you can place them in.
Okay, I see a question here. Is there a campaign progression, or are the scenarios all standalones? Maybe Kuri can take this one.
Yes, all scenarios are standalone. There isn't a campaign because, once again, this represents things that could have been and not necessarily things that were, right, in between God of War and God of War Ragnarok.
Okay, so Leo talked about the progression and skill trees, but first we need to talk about these. So, what are these?
So these are the synergy track and the menace track. I'll start with, I guess, with the good news before the bad news, right? So, as Leo explained previously, there are ways to get synergy. The main one is through the dice, which you can use when both players have dealt damage to a monster that is defeated. And if you roll well, you can get some synergy. And as it grows, you're allowed to improve your action deck. So the quality of the cards that you draw are better. So your actions are stronger. And also, you're allowed to upgrade your skill tree. It depends on the thresholds, right? Not all of them are the same. And eventually, as you grow up the synergy track, you also increase your hand limit. It's interesting because these are choices that players have to make as well. So only one hero increases their skill tree when it reaches that threshold. Only one hero may increase their hand limit. So players have to choose who gets that extra hand limit cube to place on their dashboard. Once again, they have to discuss and work together, right? So the synergy track, the more synergy you have with your with your other friendly player, the better the heroes will work and evolve. And its counterpart is the menace track. Various effects throughout the game will make the menace track advance. It also advances once every round, and as that happens, more monsters will take extra actions. Also, we will draw additional cards. So after, for example, the eighth threshold, the game gets progressively faster paced, and the monsters take way more actions. And once you reach the 14th threshold, If the boss hasn't appeared yet on the map, it will appear and it will be enraged and it will be very hard to deal with.
Deal with
It,
him before he gets enraged.
deal with him
Because you made
before
him wait and he's mad. You took too long.
he wants his dinner. And and if you ever reach the end of the menace track, the scenario has overwhelmed you, right? You weren't able to complete the scenario before the proposed time, and the game is lost. You can also see that the menace track is where you place the monster cards and the boss reference cards. So this is where the modularity comes in, that we spoke beforehand.
Anything to add there, Leo?
No, Chris playing perfectly. There's also other modularity. For example, skill trees. There's 4 of them for each character in the card box. So each upgrade also will get different. Oh, so here's the skill trees. Yeah. So at the start of the game, both players choose between the 4 that they have available, 2 of them. So this will dictate how players will play their characters. So Kratos is made to be more tankier, more aggressive, while Atreus is trying to be more agile and support. So, for the skill trees that they have available, you'll be able to choose which path they are going to target and try to focus on. These skill trees, as you can see there, they always come with the first part. So, for example, there we have one for Atreus, which he has +2 move and +1 range to bolster his ability to move across the map and also increase his range to help anywhere needed. And after that, if you upgrade it again, you'll have to choose which of the 2 paths you're taking. So you're either being able to select your hand better by discarding a card and drawing another one, or being able to heal when you move. So there's choices within choices, right? So there's other Atreus cards. One of them also deals damage. The other one makes him summon faster. So based on the scenario that you're playing or the strategy that you're doing with the other player, you'll be able to choose which powers you think it's best and be able to play the scenario in a better fashion.
Okay. So each character has 4 possible skill trees, and they'll choose 2 at the beginning, right?
Perfect. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Does every scenario have a boss?
Yes. Bosses for some scenarios are important that they are the specific boss because it's flavorful to the scenario. But most of them you can pick any boss or random them, and actually killing the boss is what triggers the game winning state. So usually scenarios have a quest based for the, what the scenario is, and after you finish the quest, or if you haven't finished uh, fast enough, they'll get spawned wire trying to finish the quest, and you have to deal with the boss. Once you kill the boss, you win the scenario.
Ah, okay. Okay. So we talked about the bosses, but bosses are not all that comes in a scenario, right? First, you'll have to deal with these guys. Can you introduce us to them?
Okay, so these pretty miniatures are the monsters that we have in the car box. So from there's a bunch of them, but I don't know if you guys play God of War. Hopefully you have, so you recognize most of them. But we have from left to right, top to bottom, we have the Scout Raider, which is a ranged monster. Is Monsters could be melee or ranged, which causes them to play differently, not only in their abilities, but also how they will play out in the game. So that also plays in modularity. So if you play against, for example, 2 melee monsters or 2 ranged monsters, are going to be completely different games and how players should behave. So we have Scout Raider, then we have the Nightmare, which is more a supportive monster to the other monsters. He buffs them and causes them to active more often. We have Wolver, which is just a powerhouse. He has a bunch of health and deals a lot of damage. We have the Revenant, which is also ranged. He teleports a lot. He's a bad guy. Yeah. We have Tata Worm now. He is very sneaky. He burrows and he gets out of the board and he appears back in your space attacking you. So it's really, really uh, hard to deal with him. You have to track down what they're going to do based on their behavior. And then on his right, we have the Scout Warriors, which is the counterpart of Scout, Raider Scout. He's melee, so he's more of a swarm guy. He spawns a lot. They're more easier to deal with, but they can overcome you if you don't deal with them fast enough. Then we have the Hellwalkers, which also swarm you, but they stun you by with their frost and all. And then we have the Wolf, which is pretty intimidating. He's stronger than his other melee counterparts. He's just weaker than Wolver, for example. He also is a beast. Yeah.
On a personal question here,
Okay.
who's your favorite among these?
Okay. Personally, I really like Nightmare. Maybe I'm biased
Hmm.
because I made some of his abilities, but I really like Nightmare. Also, his miniature for me looks dope. I mean, he's not the beefiest, but it's so many details, and I mean, I just like it.
What about you, Kuri?
I'm between the Hellwalker and the Wolver, and I I don't know because I think they're both pretty tough. You have less Wolvers in the game in general, right? But the Hellwalkers are pretty tough for how many there are, and they're to me they're the hardest ones to kind of defeat. But I'm a very straightforward kind of player, so the straightforward kind of enemies are the ones that usually bog me down as well.
Yeah, that's an important thing to say. On the monsters topic, monsters have different amount of miniatures, and their reference card will show how much health they have and how much they spawn at the start of the game. So, for example, if you're facing Hellwalker or Wolver, it's a completely different experience because Wolver has 8 health and deals 2 damage, but he only has 2 miniatures. Only one starts at the board. Hellwalkers have 4 health, so half the health, and they do less damage, but they start with 3 on the board. So that's how we change how the modularity is going to impact the game in a more balanced way. So even if you're playing, the game changes a lot also because of that. So if you're playing with Hellwalker and Raider Warrior, they will swarm you so much. It starts with 6 miniatures on the board. If you're playing with Wolverine and Revenant, there will only be 2 miniatures on the board, but they're going to be really strong. They also give more rewards because they're stronger.
Cool. Okay. There are 2 questions I'd like to tackle. First one, I'll take myself. Will this have potential for expansions in the crowdfunding campaign or potential Gamefound exclusives? Maybe play up to 3 or 4. You ask a very good question because you ask if it has potential. And I will say, I think it does. You should follow the campaign and see what we have in store. We are known to make quite an event out of these. You will likely want to come back and take a look every day from tomorrow onwards. And let's see what we unlock or not.
Make sure to follow the Gamefound page. If you do it now, you can still get the early bird.
Yes, true.
Yeah,
True.
extra we're giving.
Last 24 hours to follow the campaign and get the follower gift along with your pledge.
The
And
exclusive
going
set of cards.
yes, that's it. And to go back to our current theme, how does enemy behavior work in this game? Can players counter/read their moves just like in the video game? We do have some cards that we can show that will help illustrate this.
Yes, I'd like to take this one, and then
Please do.
maybe Leo can complement. But yes, I'd say you can counter and read the enemy moves to an extent, right? As you get familiar with the game, just as in God of War, as you play, you start understanding the enemy patterns and behaviors. And this happens as you start drawing their behavior cards, right? They are limited. Once they're done, they're reshuffled. And you can start understanding and counting the cards. They're not that many, so it's not really that difficult to do. But it will help you defeat the monsters for sure, knowing the monster behaviors. At the same time, there's still enough of them where there's still a variety. And sometimes if you don't plan ahead, even though you know what the monster is going to do, you might not be able to make it, right? So you need to think about your own behavior and how you will increase your synergy, right? And try to defeat the puzzles.
Yeah, so to complement, the at the start of the game, once you chosen or pick randomly which monsters are going to be in the scenario, you're going to form two 6 card decks. One is always the same, which is the rune deck, as you can see on the left there, which there's always 2 red, 2 greens, 1 blue, and 1 yellow rune, and 2 cards of each monster that this is one deck, the rune deck, and the other is the behavior deck. The behavior deck has 2 cards of each monster. So, for example, if you have Nightmare and Revenant for the scenario, you will shuffle both of his behavior cards alongside with the scenario behavior card. Round.
Because the winter is very harsh.
Oh, I disconnected. Sorry, I'm not.
You're
Can
back.
you hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. You're back. You're back. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know where I ended, but I'll just continue. So at the start of the enemy phase, you just draw 1 rune card and 1 behavior card. The behavior card is going to tell you what you're going to activate. So if you have the Nightmare and Revenant, you could draw one of these cards or the scenario behavior card. And once you draw them, you'll see which of his behaviors you're going to do based on the rune that you draw. So for example, there we have the Revenant card with the red rune. Let's say we drew that. The Revenant activates, which is that first symbol there, and if it deals damage, it deals +1 wound because you can block. So if you know that the Revenant could activate and there's still a rune card to be drawn off the rune deck, you could potentially read ahead and keep a card to block, which then you'll suffer less damage. So there's a lot of that in the game. Even if you don't count cards, just knowing what they're possibly going to make makes you play better. So let's say you're making decisions. Kratos is under a lot of pressure, and he chooses whether he should move or keep a card to block. He could just potentially choose to keep the card to block because the Revenant could activate with the red card and then suffer less damage, for example. That also happens with the scenario. Scenarios also, if you remember what they could possibly happen, then you just play better throughout the scenario with this.
Yeah. Okay. I see a question here that I think is interesting. We'll have to go back to skill trees, I think, but I really like how you used cubes to record the skill tree decisions. Modularity for each scenario. Are newly earned skills linked to the previous skill card you already picked? I think that's visible here.
Yeah, it's always we only have one for show, but all of them are related to the previous one. So players will have 2 skill trees. So let's say Atreus has this one and the other one that could make him draw more cards. If you choose the one that makes him draw more cards, the upgrade would be something related to that. If you choose the movement one, which is the one shown, both upgrades are related to that. So most of them are really related. For example, there we have movement and you have card selection. So you could discard a card to get a card in your discard. This is not totally related to move and range, but it bolsters the ability to use that ability better. So at the least, that's they're related in that regard.
Yes.
Yes.
Just to add, I think that when you continue further into the same skill tree, it's generally going to improve the previous effect, right? So by cycling through your cards, you can get a move or an attack, right? And it makes you versatile, which is what this skill tree is proposing, right? By giving you more move and more range, you're creating a more versatile Atreus.
Yeah. Okay. So we covered the monsters. I'm not sure we have any other questions on them, or if we do move forwards. Okay. So we cover the monsters. Time to take a look at the bosses.
Oh, actually, I could add something
Okay.
there. So as you can see on the cards, the reference card there for the Nightmare on the top, you can see how many miniatures of them start on the board. So for example, Nightmare has 4 health, so it starts with 2 miniatures on the board. The information on the right, which is the dice, is how many times you rolled the reward dice once you once you defeat them. So the Revenant, for example, it only has one miniature at the start of the game, but it rolls twice. It's not showing there, but the stronger miniatures, you roll the reward dice twice. And as we explained the synergy track before, as you can see on the purple die there, once you roll it, you gain that icon, which synergy. So if you roll twice, you'll be able to upgrade faster to upgrade your skill trees, get hand limit, and stronger cards.
And do they drop loot?
That's precisely it. So the reward die that I mentioned, that's exactly what we try to mimic from the experience of God of War. So every time you defeat any monster, you roll the dice. If you defeat them by having synergy, which means having damage from both players, meaning that you were able to uh, communicate well with your play with the friendly player and have synergy, then you'll be able to roll both dice to get the bigger rewards. One of the dices, which is the black one, is called the reward dice. It gives health and it makes you be able to use your ultimate ability faster. And it could also draw cards. There's only one face, but if you get lucky, you could also draw cards. The other one is the synergy die, which gives you upgrades, and you could also gain health or get to make your ultimate ability faster.
And a question about the map that I think is interesting. Is it scenario based and laid out or a random exploration?
It's scenario based. Each scenario has the layout of the tiles that we use. We use tiles for multiple scenarios, but scenarios usually have a bunch of the way that the map they fit into each other makes the feel very different. But they're fixed. They're based on the scenario that you're playing.
Okay. So back to the bosses, shall we?
Let's go.
Okay. Here they are.
Okay, so these are the 4 bosses that we have on the core box. So from the left to the right, we have the Raider Chief, which Raider Chief is a character that buffs all the monsters that are on the board. We have one scenario that displays him better with also both raiders as monsters that are going to be played in that scenario. And he's a heavy hitter. He buffs the other monsters and he also heals himself. Next, we have the ogre, which has a lot of health. And he also hits hard. He's more. He throws people around once he enters in the board. He just gets Kratos and throws in Atreus, and he's really tough to be defeated. Next, we have the Ice Ancient, which is very different from the other bosses because in order to defeat him, he has a different mechanic. He only has 8 health in contrast to the ogre, which has 40. Because the way to deal him damage is that as you deal him damage, he drops his ice hearts in the map. And you have to deal him damage with his own ice hearts that he drops. So you have to position yourself in a way that attacking him by getting also the hearts that he drops. Also, he's ranged and he also stuns you and he makes your life miserable. So yeah, be minded that. And then we have the Fire Troll, which as you can see, he's really big. He has a big pillar as well, and he uses that pillar to throw people around and deals a lot of damage. He can charge in you. Also, he uses fire tokens, which he places on the board, which causes players to, once they enter there, to take damage. So you have to position yourself in a way to not suffer so much damage from the fire while being able to counter his pillar activities, which is AoE, and he also moves to that. So yeah, they play very different from each other, as I explained a little bit of the flavor, but they're all very fun to play with.
Yeah, and you can imagine, since they play very differently, how this can once again create a lot of replayability by swapping them out in different scenarios, right? Where scenarios that you have to move around and be everywhere at once, it might be harder with some bosses than others, for example.
Huh. So, to repeat my question from before, which is your favorite?
I'll go with the Fire Giant. I think that it's hard to move around when everything's on fire, and I have a lot of fun with that.
That's true. I mean, my favorite, but one of the hardest ones is the Ice Ancient. I really like his mechanic of having less health, but also being very different the way you have to do him damage. Also, he stunning you makes you have to play differently, so you have to block his attacks. Others you can tank and then heal back up and try to attack them back. With Ice Ancient, if you don't block and if you don't position correctly, you'll get stunned, which causes you to lose cards to be able to get back up. So I really like that intensity that you have to be mindful of what he's going to do and the behavior cards, as I explained before, and all.
I see a question that I think I'll take myself as well. What are these in scale compared to the hero minis? So scale is a question that we always get. And scale here is 32 millimeters, our usual scale for other games. Kratos specifically is a bit taller. I think he's 34 millimeters, 35 maybe, because he's a tall guy. And these are huge. These are huge. The Fire Troll is the biggest miniature in the box. He is 115 millimeters, so he towers above the heroes.
He's big.
Yeah. Yes. So when a boss spawns in the board, how do you add him to the game? How do you add him to the deck of cards?
Perfect. So, the boss, he doesn't start in the game right away. It depends on the scenario, but most cases he doesn't. And once he only gets into the game whether if you finish the scenario quest, which, for example, in the scenario where the Raider Chief is the boss that you have to play against, he only enters after you finish the quest related to Raiders, right? And once he enters by completing the scenario quest, he is placed on the scenario setup. There's going to be a boss spawn zone. He starts there, and every single boss has a battle cry effect, which once he enters, he does his effect, which is very unique from each other and causes the game to already be shaped differently once he enters the game. And once he enters, as we explained before, we have the cards for the behavior cards at the start of the game. You place of the 6 card deck, 2 of each monster and 2 for the scenario card. And once you add the boss, you get all those behavior cards, remove 1 of each monster, and add the boss to behavior of the boss cards. Okay, and then they'll activate as the monsters would. You draw them, and then you play as they would. And so each of them, as the monsters, have 3 different behaviors, or 4 sometimes, based on the rune that you're playing with. And you also have to think of how they're going to play out based on the runes that you're drawing with them.
Okay. Very cool. And I think there is just one last character to introduce, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I think. Okay,
Okay,
so this is Freya. She is played in one of the scenarios. She is the boss for that scenario, and she is trying to defeat Kratos at all costs. She only attacks Kratos, and your objective in that scenario is run away from her. You can't even deal her damage. As you can see, she has no health. You just have to deal with her. You can try to slow her down, but she is trying at all costs to get you in her destruction wave and try to stop Kratos from moving. Yeah.
Okay. So she works a bit.
She's similar to the bosses, but she starts from the start of the game. As I said, this is the only case I think. From yeah, so by since she starts from the beginning of the game, she hits hard. The objective of the scenario is very different from the other ones. The other ones are trying to advance the quest and then try to defeat the boss. This one, you're trying to advance the quest, but trying to not to die to Freya because she is pissed. So she is trying to defeat Kratos at any cost. And she has her different abilities there, as you can see. She activates by moving forward faster. So if you're trying to run away from her, she'll get to you. She stuns Kratos, and she attacks him really hard. Her scenario is one of the coolest ones, very different from the other ones.
Really cool. I think that about covers it, right? Did we miss anything?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Okay, so we are now roughly 24 hours away from launch. We'll launch tomorrow, 3 p.m. EST. So this is the final 24 hours to get the follower gift, correct? Which is, I don't think we covered that. It's an alternate, it's a set of cards.
Yeah, it's a bonus card. So as you progress in the synergy track, one of the ways that you get stronger is by adding action cards in the deck. So the starting action deck is four cards of each color, one with the power of one. As you, I don't know if you guys remember, but the cards, they have a color and a number usually. Then what we give you as a follower gift is additional bonus cards that you place on the upgrade deck. So whenever you're upgrading on the synergy track, you'll just get more of those cards added to your deck, which they're usually stronger. The follower gift ones, they're thematic, which I think we're going to showcase in the Gamefound, but they are really different from the ones that we cover on the card box, for example. The ones that we have in the card box are really straightforward and really symmetrical. These ones are more wild. Let's put it like that. So they could be really intense.
Okay. I think we'll take maybe one or two final questions, and then we can say our goodbyes and our last messages. Okay, let me pick one here. Any chance for some app interactions, maybe narration with voice actors? Not in the works.
Yeah, so far we have not done anything with an app in regards to this game.
The game is really simple. We have done before, but for this game, I don't think it's needed based on the simplicity of the game. So you don't need one of those to work in the game.
Yeah. What about difficulty? The $1,000,000 question.
I think that the game is, like Leo said, simple to learn, but it can become hard. I think that you can also impose challenges to yourself. Once again, certain bosses and certain monsters are harder together, and certain scenarios are harder with specific monsters. So you can ramp it up, but I do believe that it's interesting enough. Difficulty wise, you will find a challenge.
Yeah, as we were designing the game, being a two-player cooperative game, cooperative games as a whole usually are you have to have a challenge. If it's easy, I think players won't find it as amusing to play in. So there's definitely difficulty in it, but as Chris said, it's easier to learn, really easy. The mechanics are simple, but it gets you could have a learning curve that you could perform really better in all scenarios.
Okay. How is the setup? I notice I play games a lot more if the setup is quite quick. Like Soul That May Die, it's quite quick. How is setup?
Well, it's faster than Death May Die.
Oh.
But it usually has about 4 or 5 tiles which are really easy to place them. There are not many tokens that you have to place on top of the tiles. So most of the time, I think it's going to be only you could choose the skill tree. So I guess that would be another thing. But the setup is really straight up. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
There are a few decks, everything. There are a few different or very outlandish tokens or anything of the likes. And the tracks, everything is easy and it's supposed to be close to both players and very accessible. It's very fast.
Okay. Are the scenarios played in a certain order? Does the Kratos Atreus synergy relationship reset or carry over? I
Yes,
think
this
we covered
relationship.
this.
Yeah, we covered this before, but since we're close to the end, this
Yes.
relationship resets every episode. There's not a specific campaign. The scenarios are, I would assume, in order of difficulty, but they're all supposed to be equally challenging, right? So
yeah.
don't read too much into this. I guess you can just pick your favorite and play, and there is nothing that ties them together.
Yeah, just the first scenario, it's more introductory scenario. There's no scenario quests. You're trying to get more familiar with the game mechanics, but it has every single mechanic that every other scenario would have to showcase it to you. But the other ones are equally the same difficulty. Just the first one is a little slightly simpler and also easier for that matter.
Okay. What would the average game length be?
We estimate about 60 minutes. When we play, it's a little faster, but we estimate 60 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, Guilherme. Will you ship a copy of Leo with each copy of the game? Follow the
Well,
campaign. Let's see what the
who
stretch goals
knows?
bring us.
I want mine now. Where can I get one?
Who knows? If we reach a next amount of founders, maybe we have my number in there. Who knows?
Okay. How many days the campaign will run? Guys, tune in tomorrow. We will see. You will see everything then. Okay, and I see a question that I think is a good wrap up of this live stream. Is there any one aspect of the game design that you're really proud of? I'll give you a few seconds to think.
Oh, I know mine.
You know mine. Okay, you know
Okay,
yours.
I started with this in today's live stream, which was that as the characters Kratos and Atreus synergy evolves in the game, the players behind the characters also develop a bond, and I think that's really hard to achieve. So I'm very proud of this, and I hope everyone this I can meet everyone's expectations, right? I'm setting the bar real high now, but I really do believe it, and I'll stick to it. And I think that that is in part in the way that we made the action system through the cards, and really the way that damage allocation was made in this game. I think that that's very creative and fresh.
That's a
Yeah,
cool aspect to highlight. I think not very
definitely so.
usual.
Definitely so. It's, I mean, I started working on the project by half of the by when it was done by already by Fabio and Alex, and their vision on the game really having to be between the bond between the players to showcase Kratos and Atreus really showcases the God of War sensation. So yeah, it's definitely something amazing. My aspect, however, is I'm really sadistic, so I like how the enemies activate. I like the menace track and how the behavior cards work. We really took our time and work to do them. Each monster has different behaviors, so the every time you play them, even like for example, as you could draw only red runes with a certain monster, then the next game could be completely different. And since you can predict them but not so much, so you always have to think of what they're going to do. And being able to do this, it was cool because we could showcase what the monsters actually do in God of War and show what they being very different from each other. For example, Alex did the Tatsa worm, which is like one of the most amazing monsters that I've seen in any game. Like that's a worm. He burrows himself. Like I've never seen this mechanic in any other board game. He burrows and then he appears again, dealing him more damage. So you have to think of that. It's amazing. I mean, that's one of the cases, but there's a lot of monsters that do that really well.
It's really cool. Well, I think that's the time we had for today. So I guess we as a team hope to see you all tomorrow during lunch, 3 p.m. EST. Any final goodbyes from you guys? Let's start. Kuri started last time. Let's start with Leo this time.
Yeah, everyone tune in for the campaign. I'm sure you're going to be surprised and amazed by what we have to offer. Yeah, stay tuned. Yeah, I think you're going to like the game a lot.
What about you, Kuri?
Yeah, I'm also super excited. Stay tuned. Go and follow us on Gamefound now, so you can get the exclusive cards, and we'll see you all tomorrow. I'm super excited. I really want to see what everything that we're gonna show. There's so much I want to say, but as always, it's super hard to keep my mouth shut. So
Let's close the stream before Corey says anything.
Thank you all for joining me. Thank you all for joining us, and bye. See you soon.
Bye.